Right now, you know what time it is. Not because you checked a clock. Because your body told you. You feel when you're tired. You feel when you're hungry. You feel when something is off. There's a system running inside you, invisible, constant, and precise. Scientists call it your circadian rhythm. You've probably heard the term. What you haven't heard is what happens when you take it away. Not slow it down. Not disrupt it. Remove it entirely. In the summer of 1962, a 23-year-old French geologist named Michel Siffre climbed down into a glacier cave in the Alps. He brought food, water, a sleeping bag, and a telephone connected to a small team waiting on the surface. He told them he planned to stay for 2 months. He said he wanted to study the cave's geology. That wasn't the real reason. He wanted to find out what a human being becomes when time disappears. The cave was called Scarasson. It sat in total darkness 375 feet underground. No light reached it. No sound from above. No clock, no watch, no calendar. Just Michel, a small tent pitched on the ice, and the absolute dark pressing in around him. He gave his team one instruction before he descended. When he called the surface, they were to say almost nothing. No greetings. No conversation. Just record whatever he reported and respond as little as possible. He didn't want a single external cue that could tell his brain what time it was. The experiment began. For the first few days, nothing unusual happened. He ate when he was hungry. He slept when he was tired. He called the surface when he woke up, reporting his subjective experience of time. The team above wrote everything down. By day 10, the gaps started appearing. He would call the surface certain he had just slept 8 hours. They would tell him he had slept 15. He would be completely sure it was late afternoon. It would be 3 in the morning. The distance between what his body was telling him and what was actually true kept widening, and he had absolutely no way to feel it happening. He wasn't experiencing the passage of time incorrectly. He was experiencing a completely different version of it. By the middle of the experiment, the concept of days had vanished entirely. His body was no longer running on anything close to a 24-hour cycle. Sleep phases stretched to 48 hours. Sometimes longer. He would wake, feel fully rested, work for what felt like a productive afternoon, eat a meal, feel the natural pull of tiredness, and sleep, and 30 hours would have passed on the surface. His handwriting deteriorated. His thinking became slower, more associative. He began talking to objects in the cave. His tent. His equipment. The walls. Not because he was breaking down. Because without the structure of external time, the brain begins to quietly restructure experience itself. The internal monologue changes. The relationship between thought and duration dissolves. You stop moving through time. Time stops moving at all. When Siffre finally climbed out of Scarasson on September 14th, he was completely certain it was around August 20th. 25 days were missing. Not because they had passed quickly. Not because they had been forgettable. But because his brain had reorganized time so thoroughly that those 25 days existed nowhere in his felt experience of them. He said later that this was the most frightening thing that happened to him in that cave. Not the darkness. Not the solitude. Not the cold. The missing time. His paper was published and then largely ignored. He was a geologist, not a psychologist. The scientific community wasn't sure what to do with his findings. Was this one man's unusual response? A product of the specific cave, the specific conditions, his specific personality? They needed to know if this was universal. So in 1972, Siffre went back. This time the location was Midnight Cave in Texas. The plan was 6 months alone, 200 feet underground, same conditions. No light source beyond a single lamp. No clock. No contact with the outside world except the essential daily phone call to his research team. He descended on February 14th. By the end of the first month, his sleep cycles had expanded to 48 hours. He was operating comfortably on a schedule that no modern human would recognize as livable. He felt fine. He felt, in some ways, more rested than he ever had above ground. The pressure of time, the constant awareness that an hour was passing, that a day was ending, that he was behind or ahead or exactly where he needed to be, had simply evaporated. But then something else began. By month 2, Siffre started documenting a state that his team on the surface found almost impossible to interpret. It wasn't depression. He wasn't in distress. It wasn't boredom, at least not in any form he recognized from ordinary life. He described it in his diary as a flattening, a quieting, a condition where the ordinary anxiety of anticipation, the background hum of waiting for the next thing, had gone completely silent. He had no next thing. Every moment in the cave was identical in structure to every other moment. There was no morning to look forward to, no deadline approaching, no evening coming to mark a transition. Time had stopped being a river moving in one direction and had become, in his words, a single still body of water he was floating in. He wasn't suffering. He was experiencing something he had never experienced before and had no name for. And this is the part the researchers found disturbing. When they analyzed his physiological data from this period, his body temperature, cortisol levels, heart rate variability, sleep architecture, they found something they hadn't expected. Nested inside his extended 48-hour cycles, there was a recurring phase. A period of roughly 6 to 8 hours where Siffre was neither fully awake nor fully asleep. His brain was producing wave patterns unlike anything seen in normal waking consciousness. Unlike any recognized phase of sleep. Something entirely in between. A state of consciousness his body apparently required. A state that artificial light had always interrupted before it could fully emerge. It was the same hidden phase that historian Roger Kirch had found buried in 500 years of written records, the quiet period between first and second sleep that medieval people took for granted. It was the same elevated prolactin state that psychiatrist Thomas Ware had documented in his 1992 darkness study, when volunteers placed in extended darkness spontaneously began sleeping in 2 phases with a calm, meditative interval in between. 3 completely separate lines of research. Decades apart. Different methodologies, different subjects, different intentions. The same hidden state kept reappearing the moment you removed the light. Siffre emerged from Midnight Cave on September 5, 1972. He had been underground for 205 days. He weighed significantly less than when he went in. His vision had deteriorated from months of limited light. He moved slowly. The physiological damage healed within weeks. The other thing took longer. He described in interviews over the following years something that he struggled to articulate precisely. A grief. Not for the time he had lost, he had made peace with that. But for the time he had found. Those long, structureless hours in the cave. The hidden state his brain had entered in the depths of those extended sleep cycles. The silence of a mind with nothing to anticipate and nothing to fear. He had spent 6 months experiencing something no modern human is built to access. And then he came back up into the light, and it closed. He said it felt like remembering a place you can no longer return to. Here is what the science tells us now. The average adult in an industrialized country is exposed to artificial light for 9 to 10 hours after sunset every single night. In that light, your body suppresses melatonin, delays sleep onset, compresses your sleep cycles, and never reaches the slower, darker phases your biology was built around. Your 24-hour circadian clock runs, but it runs trimmed, edited, cut down to fit inside a world that cannot afford the version of time your body actually needs. The hidden state that Siffre found at the bottom of that cave, the quiet, the flatness, the consciousness that exists between waking and sleep, most people alive today have never experienced it. Not once. Not for a single night. We didn't know it existed until someone was willing to go underground and have it taken away and then slowly, in the dark, given back. And we took away the light because we thought we were solving a problem. We were solving darkness. We didn't know darkness had something inside it. Michel Siffre conducted smaller cave experiments in the decades that followed. He spent time underground in 1999 at the age of 60, once more without light or time. Each time, the same restructuring occurred. Each time, the same hidden state emerged. And each time, he came back to the surface carrying the same grief he couldn't quite explain to journalists who asked him what it had been like. He is still alive. He lives in France. In his most recent interviews, he has said that the caves taught him one thing above everything else. Modern humans are not experiencing time. We are surviving it. We move through our days with the constant low-grade awareness that time is running out, that we are behind, that the clock on the wall and the clock in our pockets and the clock in our phones are measuring something we are always slightly failing to keep up with. We have built an entire civilization organized around not wasting time. And in doing so, we have made it almost impossible to experience time as anything other than a resource being consumed. Siffre went underground and had all of that stripped away. He did not find peace, exactly. He found something older than peace. Something that was already there, already built into the hardware, waiting patiently inside every human being who has ever lived, buried under centuries of fire and candles and gas lamps and electric light and the endless glow of screens that never turn off. He found what time actually feels like when nothing is telling you how much of it is left. And then he came back up. And the light came on. And it was gone.